You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi, and thanks for coming back again to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis, where we tell the story of my journey on the Appalachian Trail in 2019. It's only been 2 days since we last spoke, and nothing especially remarkable has happened, but I had an opportunity to get the show out. I had an interview with a new through hiker, new to me at least, and I had another listener come and visit me. And I have a letter from a listener that really deserves a response. So hopefully you'll think the show is worthwhile. Our next stop will be Palmerton, 3 days away, so this is logistically worthwhile as well. I must confess I am finding it more and more difficult to get the show out. I think these days, my shortest day for the last 2 or 3 weeks has been 17 miles. And really, we've been putting the miles on pretty quickly. So when we get to camp or when we get wherever we get, I'm often exhausted, more exhausted perhaps than I should be. And getting the show has become more difficult, but I try to keep them going because it's a great record for me. Hopefully you're enjoying it as well. And it does record sometimes the humdrum stuff that does happen on a hike. So hopefully you think it's worthwhile. But before we get to day number 101, let's hear from our sponsor, Sawyer. When I hit the trail in 2014, I soon discovered that I come with the wrong water filter. Everybody else had a Sawyer squeeze. Eventually I bought a squeeze and I loved it. I'm going again this year, and top of my list of things to buy was the new micro squeeze filter by Sawyer. Like all Sawyer stuff, it just works. You can filter up to 100,000 gallons, and their full-size squeeze filter comes with a lifetime warranty. Last year, believe it or not, more than 4 million people got clean water through a Sawyer water filter. But if you think that Sawyer is just about water filters, you could not be more wrong. Nope, they supply everything to protect you, both in the backcountry and the backyard. Protect your gear and clothes as I did with their permethrin fabric treatment, which is 100% odorless after drying. With all the ticks and bugs around, this is an absolute must. They also provide sunscreens and first aid products. Find out more by visiting Sawyer.com. Thanks guys, we appreciate your support. I was actually hoping to meet up with Kelsey Myers of Sawyer when I got to Duncannon, but we got to Duncannon so quickly. We did it from Boiling Springs in one go, and when I contacted her, we were actually just about to leave, and she was in Washington, D.C., so perhaps another time. Now, let's hear how things went yesterday, day number 101. Day 101, Swatara Gap, mile 1184.1 to just down and just past, in fact, Hurtline Campsite and Creek, mile 1201.2, 17.1 miles. We were driven back to the trail by our driver of the evening before. She was, like Trigger, she was from Louisville, Kentucky, and the two of them were trying to find somebody they had in common. They all seemed to know. There were surnames each other knew, but they couldn't quite identify somebody that both of them knew. But kind of nice for Trigger to meet somebody from his hometown. As always, we had an early climb, about 1,000 feet, and it wasn't too bad at all. We were planning on getting to Port Clinton, which was 35 miles away in 2 days. So we were looking to stop after about 17 miles. It's funny, actually, we've been quite happy thinking now about stealth campsites. I never used to want to do it by myself, particularly. I did do it a few times, but more by accident than anything else. In this particular case, because we're hiking together and we're happy camping together, it's not a worry to me at all. So when we talked about just having a stealth campsite, I was happy for it. Trigger was happy for it as well. And so we were just going to hike for about 16, 17 miles and see what was there. As luck would have it, we could see that there was this Hurtline campsite, tent site. It's the site of what used to be a shelter. The shelter's now taken down, and we were promised there was going to be a picnic table there, which in fact there turned out not to be. But what I'll tell you about when we got to the shelter later. After about 11 miles, I think it must have been about 1 o'clock, 1:15 in the afternoon. I'd been hiking behind Trigger. I came up on him, he sat down and started eating. So apparently we were having lunch. There was a log for me, so we sat on a log and then had a convivial lunch, just chatting and eating our food. And I looked at GoHooks and saw that we were about to cross Pennsylvania 501, and I knew that the 501 shelter was just beyond. Had great memories for me. I enjoyed stopping there last time. It was a packed shelter the time before. And so I said to Trigger, let's go and check out the 501 shelter. So we stopped to check it out. It's an enclosed shelter. There's actually a caretaker on site. Nice fella, we saw him and he seemed quite happy to see us. We were just hanging out, sitting around the picnic table. Actually, I think we're having another snack, funnily enough. We looked inside. There's trash cans in there. It's kind of nice. There's individual bunk beds, and as I say, it was absolutely jam packed before when I went through it. This time there was no one there at all. But then again, it was midday or soon after midday, and there was actually a takeaway menu for pizza. So how great is that? You can get takeout delivered to the shelter, which was just off the road. And I don't particularly like shelters that are close to the road, but this one, I say, seems to have its own thing about it, where it's enclosed, there is a caretaker, so the normal worries of a shelter being the road perhaps aren't really there. So we carried on, and it was a particularly flat day in terms of we were on a ridge line, so it wasn't particularly difficult, but it was nice and varied. It wasn't tedious like the one we'd had a few days previously, and we eventually got to the Hurtline campsite and creek, and it seemed to meet our requirements. It was, it was everything we would want in a place to sort of not so much stealth camp, but to camp at night. But we were really disappointed when we got there. There was a guy there and his 2 young kids kicking around in the water. There were no flat tent sites, but he said there's a couple just over the creek and just up the hill a bit. So we went up there, and there were 2 flat sites, tent pads, but one guy had his pack on one of them, and I thought, well, they're not very good at all. So we had a little look around and that. And there was a blue blaze, and the guy back at the creek had told us there was a blue blaze leading down to a waterhole where we could have a swim if we wanted to, and I really fancied a swim. So we wandered down there and we found nice open space right by the waterhole, which was dammed, and so the water was rushing down from it, so it's quite noisy, and we thought we were going to camp. We'd camp down there. I went back up again. To get Trigger's bag, and I walked over to the guy who was set up by the tenting pad, big guy, about my age, in fact turned out to be exactly my age, and big moustache, and I walked up to him and he faced me, and I started talking to him, and he said, "Steve, Mighty Blue." his name was Ranger Z. He did part of the trail last year. He's going to try to complete it now this year, so he's in his first few days hiking again. I said to him, "We've got space down at this by the waterhole. Come down and join us for dinner or something," because where Trigger and I were camped, we set our tents up already. There was a fire ring and beautiful logs set up as seats, and also we could cook on them as well. So it was pretty nice set up down there. So he came down and joined us, and Trigger and I did consider going swimming, so we stripped down to our underpants and started walking into the water, and it was bloody freezing, absolutely freezing in there. So we backed out in the end. We got our feet wet, and he went up to his knees, and I went up to mid-calf, I guess. But yeah, we both backed out from swimming because it was darn freezing. But it was very nice. We sat around and had dinner together, and we we were quite comfortable, chatting away. So between all three of us were 66 years old, and it was just nice to hang out with guys of my age, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I had probably the one, and I keep saying this, but again, I had one of the best seats on my hike. That night, I had my vestibule open. It was a lovely, cool night, but not cold. The river, the dam was emptying over the side of the dam, really loud, but it just seemed to drift. I just drifted away, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really did. But that's the end of day number 101. Before we move on to day number 102, I just want to address an email I got from a lady called Gina Charnock. She's a fellow Brit, and she starts very nice, talks about us passing the halfway marker and says it's a fantastic effort, which we feel it is as well. And she said she's been wanting to write about the podcast in the past and so on. And so she listens to the show and binge listened to all of the episodes. She says, my husband and I are based in the UK, and last year we decided to plan a through hike of the trail northbound for 2021. I should say we're in our mid-30s, no kids, and both have good careers. As I'm sure it's for most, taking 6 months out is a big deal for us. The expense is huge, and taking time out of work will most definitely have some impact on our careers, but I was sure the benefits of completing the trail would outweigh all of this. But then she says, recently we have both started having doubts. I've been following pages and posts online and cannot believe the attitude behaviour of some hikers on the trail. The way in which people talk to or at each other, the judgments, I find appalling. Part of the reason for doing the trail is to get away from all of this. We may not have the opportunity to do anything like this again until we retire. We want to make sure our sacrifice will be worth it. I mean, you can see where this is going, can't you, really? Our concern is with overcrowding, packed shelters, arguments, bitching, etc. I know you spoke to a guy briefly recently around episode 155-ish from the UK who had the same concerns. You both kind of put it down to just online nonsense, nothing like life on the trail. Other than to say the people are great, which I can't help but wonder if that's based more on trail magic, she said it's something I don't feel is really discussed at length on podcasts, vlogs, or in books. But I think something the most potential through hikers must be worried about. I would love to hear some truthful opinions on this, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then she says some other kind of things about the show. Gina, I could have contacted you directly and I could have just emailed you back for this, but I know this must be a concern for various people, what happens online, especially some of these Facebook groups. And I also understand the concern of parents when their children are going, and obviously spouses when their spouse is going. And some of the stuff you read, I quite agree, is appalling. But when someone says people are great, it isn't because of the trail magic. I promise you, it's because of the other people they meet on the trail. They meet somebody at a shelter at, mile 800, and they both know what it's taken them both to get there. And you immediately get involved into deep conversations and deeper relationships with people than you would otherwise do. Please, 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 please do not be put off by the crap you read online. You kind of ought to ignore it. And I know I should, and I get called into this myself. I've had vitriol online towards me over things which I hate. They're always the things I remember more than anything else because they hurt me. I must admit they do hurt me. And sometimes I respond and I perhaps shouldn't respond. It's just nonsense. None of these people are out there. You don't meet anybody like this in the trail. I know we've had a terrible incident this year, and I know there have been one or two other little incidents, and that kind of worries me about perhaps some of the future of the trail. But I promise you, Gina, nothing like what you read online is any reflection of what it's like to be at the end of a long day's hiking. You come into a shelter, there are people there already. If there's no space in the shelter, nearly every time, if you want to stay in the shelter, they'll move up and let you in. And then you sit down and you cook your food and you just scooch up and you help each other and you're friendly to each other. And someone hasn't got any water or somebody hasn't got any gas, somebody will give it to you. So please don't worry about it. And I really hope that people listening to this do understand that the trail is nothing like you might perceive it to be online. Come out and see it for yourself. It's wonderful. It's just as wonderful this year as it was when I went in 2014, and I think that's a good sign as well. So please, that's your answer. I'm not going to write back to you, although other than to tell you that I put it on the show this week. I thought it was important for other people to hear what I think about the people on the trail. You're going to find 99% of them are good people who you're going to love spending time with. Okay? So let's hear now from for day number 102. Day 102. Just down from Hurtline Campsite and Creek, mile 1201.2, to Port Clinton, mile 1219.4, the 18.2 mile day. We awoke at 5 o'clock, and as most old men do, we woke up early, and the three of us sat around for, once again, a very convivial breakfast, chatting about the trail. And I don't know, Ranger Z was quite inquisitive and asking about our hike and that, and he was delighted to have met us, and we really enjoyed his company. We had an early uphill as normal, which is not a bad thing, but a few more than the usual rocks. I can feel that Rocksylvania is starting to earn its name. You know, your feet get smashed up by this, and I've got a particularly bad big toe on my right foot. The nail looks dreadful. I'm looking at it right now, actually. It looks like it should have come off weeks ago, but it's still clinging onto me right now. But the rocks are just smashing my feet up. They really are. And, of course, not only were there more than the usual rocks, the rocks got worse. And not only we got the rocks, we still got the mud and mud and mess of the last few days, and that doesn't appear to be getting any better either. We decided to stop at the Eagle's Nest shelter for lunch because we were through Pennsylvania. We found water more and more difficult to get. There are streams, and obviously when it has been raining, obviously the streams flow better. But Trigger and I keep making the mistake of coming to what we believe is the stream was a water supply. We desperately try to fill our water, and we're just eking out as much as we can. We fill enough, it takes us ages to do it, and then we walk 20 yards, 30 yards, whatever, and there is a really good fast-flowing stream. We've made that mistake so many times. We should be more confident that the stream we've found is just not the one we should be using, and just go another 50 odd yards and the real one will be there. There was it was about 0.3 of a mile walk to the shelter, and the real stream, once again, we came to a stream first and we thought, well, that can't be good for water. Carried on to the shelter, or I carried on to the shelter because Trigger was already there, and I crossed the really good stream. So we got that water on the way back out after we'd had our lunch together. There was a very sharp 150-foot climb, which was really basically the only other climb we had after the first climb all day, before the slow descent into Port Clinton. I remember the climb down and as being kind of dangerous. So I waited for Trigger. I was then ahead of Trigger by then. I waited for him because I was thinking to myself, I think it might be safer if the two of us go down together. And we decided to stick together. I started going down. I thought, this is nowhere near as bad as I thought it was. And then it was. Oh my gosh. It really does. It's almost like you're falling off the end of the world. It is a very, very steep climb down, and it's very impactful upon your knees. I must say, by the time I got down the bottom, I was very, very glad I'd done it. And I could see Trigger's face. He'd been struggling a bit as well. But, frankly, while it was pretty terrible, it didn't last for very long. So we got down pretty quickly in the end. But I say, it is quite a strain. So be careful when you're walking down there, and particularly right at the end, there are a few stone steps which in rain must be horrendous to go down. Fortunately, we did it in sunshine, and we've had pretty good weather the last few days anyway. A listener, Mike DiCello, had contacted me, and he said he wants to give us some trail magic and buy us a beer and have a bite to eat or whatever. And he said, I'd run you around wherever you want to go. And that was great. I wanted to go to Cabela's because Trigger and I have had real problems getting the smaller propane gas canisters for our cooking. So we thought to ourselves, once I'd asked Mike if he wouldn't mind, he said he'd run us to Cabela's, which wasn't that far away. It was about 10 minutes away. Cabela's is a big outdoor store. We thought they're bound to have everything there. And I also decided I was going to change my gear. Clothes I'm wearing these grey long pants and this light beigey sort of shirt. And I thought to myself, I think Mighty Blue should be dressed in blue. So I was going to buy myself a decent blue shirt and a decent pair of blue pants. And I'll tell you about what happened at Cabela's in a minute. But when we were at the pavilion, there was Mike. He was waiting for us, and there was plenty of trail magic. There was some beers there. There was soft drinks. There was food. It was great. Really nice of him to do that. And other people had bought stuff there as well. And there was one other person in the pavilion, and it was a young lady called Rose. And she was French-Canadian, and she didn't speak... she did speak great English, as it turns out. And I wanted to ask her about her through hike and how it was going. So this is Rose or Merville. Right, I'm here with a young lady called Rose or Merville. Is that
exactly,
correct?
Yes.
And where are you from?
I'm from Montreal, so French-Canadian.
French-Canadian. And you're very French-Canadian, aren't you?
Yes.
Very strong. So she's slightly nervous about speaking in English. Why are you Merville?
It comes from a French word that means émerveillement.
Which that didn't help in the least. So what does that mean? Yeah.
It means to see the wonderful thing, and not only to see it, just to feel the happiness of wonderful things.
That's wonderful. That is a really good name then. So
yes.
That really suits you, because I know that this is your first big hike like this, but you have also done another long hike, haven't you?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
I did the Camino of Compostela 2 years ago, and that hike just changed my life. It was very different, but awesome for me. And at the end of that hike, I feel so more confident that I just I want another challenge.
Sure. Well, you actually did. I mean, I did it in October, this last October, but I did it just the one from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. You did a much longer one, didn't you?
Yes.
Tell me exactly where you started from. So I still don't quite know. We've talked about it, obviously, before we recorded, but where actually in France is it?
It's called Le Puy-en-Velay.
Okay.
It's it's very close to Clermont-Ferrand,
which is. Let's say let's give France as a square. Call France as a square. There's the top left, top right, bottom
middle.
Right. It is in the middle, is it?
Middle.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is it a walk in the same way that it becomes a walk from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port? Is it signposted in the same way?
It's very similar but very different at the same time.
Right.
Just it's very similar because it's walking and we follow the way, but it's also very different because we are more French person and they have more bigger hostel with bed and breakfast.
Oh, really? Nice.
With just
French cooking. How bad?
Exactly.
How bad is that? Yes. So
it's very different.
So once you got to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, the food went downhill, didn't it?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Right. So tell me about the Appalachian Trail. When did you start?
I start March 21st.
Already, and you must be going really fast now. What sort of mileage are you doing every day?
It's very different every day. At the beginning, I was very more slow, just maybe 12 every day, but now
that used to be a good day for us.
But now I very like the 18 days.
Right. Oh, so
something.
Have you done as much as 30 or anything like that?
Yes.
Oh, really?
No, my biggest day was 24.
We've beaten you. Trigger and I did a 26 recently.
Oh, congratulations!
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So what are you finding about this hike that you enjoy so much?
Yeah, I very like it, especially because to be in the nature, I feel that I can be in contact with the real nature and maybe the real life.
All right.
Just
wow.
like, it's weird because a lot of time we say, oh, in real life, I'm a teacher.
That's right, yeah, sure.
And for me, it's just like, maybe that on the 80, we are in contact with the real world, just like before that we change everything.
Sure.
So I very like it.
So have you seen much wildlife so far? Wildlife, and bears and snakes.
Oh my God, yeah. A lot of bears.
How many bears have you seen?
Maybe 8 or 9, because I start early.
Where are they? Trigger and I have seen one between us.
No.
Just one.
Impossible. Even in the Shenandoah.
In Shenandoah, that's where we saw our one bear.
I saw just like 2 or 3 every day during that park. It was crazy.
It is great. And what about snakes? Do they bother you?
Just yesterday, a big rattlesnake. But
I haven't seen any of those.
Impossible.
Not one of those. I've seen about 2 black snakes and a garter snake. That's it.
Oh
and
my
I've
God.
seen one bear. And we saw a lot of deer. We saw a couple of deer today as well.
Yes.
So when do you think you're going to finish this?
I don't have a special schedule and I don't have a date.
Well, being Canadian, do you have to leave at a certain time though?
I have 6 months
Right.
without visa. So just like they allow me to come here 6 months.
Right.
So
what happens if you don't? Well, you will do it obviously within
Yes.
6 months. But what happens if you don't finish?
technically, I have to come back home after 6 months.
Oh, right, okay. That's a bit of a drag, yeah. But
yeah.
you're moving pretty fast, so you should be able to finish it anyway.
Yeah, I will be there. And after Canada, I plan to continue walking to my home.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So what trail will you take then from there?
It's not a trail. It's me that decided my way, just to small town to small town.
Oh, wow.
So it's 500 more kilometers.
Oh, really?
Not miles, kilometers.
Yeah.
So it's
about
less.
300 miles.
Yeah.
That should be a piece of cake.
But
won't be a problem. Yeah, won't be a problem at all.
After the 80, I can do it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, look, I'm really pleased we met, and I'm really pleased that you're enjoying it. And welcome to the country.
Thank you so much.
And I hope you enjoy it when you get to Qatar.
Yes, same.
Thank you.
What a very sweet young lady she was, and I really enjoyed talking to her. And if you look in the show notes, Mike took a photo of me interviewing her. So the four of us got into the car, and Mike drove us, and Rose came with us to Cabela's. She actually was going for a burger at Five Guys, and she was happy to get out of the car at Cabela's and wandered off to Five Guys. And Trigger and I went into Cabela's. I couldn't hardly believe this, but there was no propane gas, not of the size we wanted. It was some bigger size. There were hardly any backpacker pantry meals or Mountain House meals or the various meals you see in these places. Hardly anything there at all. And then when I went down to see clothing, I thought that the pant sizes, the blue ones with detachable legs to turn them into shorts, which I was considering buying, I would normally wear XLs. Well, XLs, I didn't even bother trying them on. But large was too big for me. A medium, although I could have fitted them, were too small. And I thought to myself, I'm not losing weight anymore. So they didn't look any good. There was nobody there to help me choose a hiking type shirt with any advice at all. I tell you, for such a big store, I was really, really disappointed. But anyway, so we then went across to Walmart and we got what we normally get, which is food. And I got some Mio, this energy stuff you squeeze into your water for your electrolytes as well. And I find it really, really good. And a couple of squeezes of that makes it for a really good drink instead of just water. We then went to a restaurant called Westies with Mike. And the three of us had, of course, burgers. Trigger, once again, had a couple of appetizers before he had his main course. He had a pork chop, I think it was. Then he asked for the dessert menu, and we had this thing called Devil's Cake or something like that.
I've never seen Trigger turn down any food or leave any food behind. This was so chocolatey, all three of us could not eat it. It was amazing, it really was. But Mike then took us back to, we had a few beers as well, which was nice. Mike then took us back to the Microtel, which we booked in Hamburg, and we were set for the night, and then we're off again tomorrow. And it's going to take about 3 days to get to Palmerton. So I'm here on Friday night. It's day number 102, and that is what happened on day number 102. So we're all caught up again. I must say that I think that Trigger and I are a pretty good team right now. We hike at around the same pace, though the one in the lead always seems to stretch the other one. So I think that we're very complementary in our hiking. What I mean by that is when Trigger goes ahead of me, he seems to be pulling away from me quite often. And the same thing happens when I go ahead of him. I'm not terribly sure why that is. It's almost as if we feel a responsibility if we're leading to pull the other one along, and that seems to work out quite nicely. So I think that we are very complementary in our hiking. And I mentioned last week that I want to finish the last week in August. I feel that with Trigger as a partner, I could well do that. We're very comfortable with these 17 to 20 mile days, and we're happy to stealth camp. And when we want a hotel or a hostel, neither of us is reluctant to pay for it. So we seem to be working out really well. We may catch Cushy and Dodger Dogs soon, and I wonder if that's going to change the balance. I just don't know, but maybe we'll find out. But anyway, I'll see you next time.